Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier, and Happy New Year to you all, and I wish health, happiness and wealth to everybody for 2020. Let me focus today on Iraq. There were some fairly dramatic events over the last few days. This is not a warning, it is a threat. Happy New Year. In a rare Twitter spat, Trump and Iran's Khamenei exchanged threats and insults to start the new year. Dan Scavino tweeted this clip on December the 31st. UN Marine Corps MV-22 Ospreys drop off Special Purpose Marine Air-Ground Task Force Crisis Response Central Command Marines at the US Embassy in Baghdad, Iraq. And I tweeted whilst I was watching this unfold in real time, the crowd owns the embassy. The crowd has been now stood down. News breaking showed us this video from the unfolding situation at the US Embassy in Iraq. I asked, will the Iranians and the Iraqis, will they be able to parlay this Iranian embassy redux, and I take you back to 1979, and make the US presence untenable, ? Or would the unrest in Baghdad instead create a pretext for the Americans to increase their military presence in Iraq to put additional pressure on Tehran and Damascus? That was Balmasov in an article on RT. A full evacuation of the embassy could be seen as severing all diplomatic ties, which is impossible given the current level of US involvement in Iraq, Lukyanov noted. In addition to the embassy and other diplomatic offices, Washington has a major military presence on Iraqi soil, using it to project power in the region. Sergei Balmasov of the Institute of the Middle East in Moscow also believes that the withdrawal of the US from Iraq is unrealistic. Such a move would hurt President Trump's chances of re-election in 2020 and lead to Iran strengthening its position in the region. Unrest in Baghdad could instead create a pretext for the Americans to increase their military presence in Iraq, to put additional pressure on Tehran and Damascus. E.J. Malrai, who writes from the Iranian angle, I have little doubt that both the US and Esper and Secretary Pompeo have jeopardized the lives of US forces in Iraq and are risking being expelled from the country. He added, I don't think Trump will like the way he is ending in 2019. And I responded to that by saying this is a Gladwellian moment for the US in Iraq and requires plenty of finesse in terms of how it's handled. I take you back to the Iranian students crowding the US Embassy in Tehran. That was November 4, 1979, and I just got to England that year, and I remember this unfolding on our TV screens. The Iranian embassy invasion lasted 444 days. That hostage crisis, that's from Dume Singh. And then you see 2019's events, Iraqi protesters burned the US embassy in Baghdad. That's from Mehdi Rizvi, 123. Iraqi security, American embassy in Baghdad, a sheet of glass is preventing absolute mayhem right now. And I thought to myself, they shoot one protester and that will be it. And that what we're watching unfold is the beginning of what might well be an ignominious year's end to the US adventure in Iraq. 13th of May last year, I was saying if the US thinks Tehran will just roll over, which appears to be the case, then they're exhibiting the same deluded ideas that they exhibited a day before the Peacock Throne got plucked. And I was saying then in May that Iran is a geopolitical bleeding edge. 25th of November, I was writing about Iran again, and I said Secretary Pompeo has allied himself with the MEK and its cult-like leader Maryam Rajavi, who tweeted, "The whole issue is that the Veliat-e Faqih regime is on its last leg." And I found that interesting. Not legs. So in some respects, I think, the perspective, if you're aligned to MEK and Maryam Rajavi, your angle that you're looking at the situation is not very credible in my view. This is a photo from the US Embassy compound in Baghdad. This is from Tech Supporter 2. I couldn't work out whether this was a made-up photograph. This, 20 minutes back, over the American Embassy in Baghdad, that was the Apache helicopters that were sent. US Marines arrived at the US Embassy in Baghdad on the MV-22 400 Airborne of US Army's 82nd Airborne Division on their way to protect US bases and embassy in Iraq. Pinecone macros, so far every time Iran throws their food, Trump has only wagged his finger at them. And he was speculating that Trump might do something different this time, and that's the key issue for me, and I think also for the oil markets as well, and for the Middle East. The Supreme Leader tweeted the following message to Trump: "You can't do anything. If you were logical, which you're not, you'd see that your crimes in Iraq, Afghanistan have made nations hate you." RM Conservative, in an interesting article, says the Iraq war was a colossal mistake that strengthened Iran beyond belief. There was never any realistic chance of installing a pro-American government in Shiite-dominated Baghdad. Our forces are eternally on the hook both for the Iranian-backed Shiite attacks and the Sunni insurgencies in response to the Shiite hegemony threatening our forces and assets in the country. This is the enduring lesson our policymakers refuse to understand as they continue to grope in the darkness, perpetuating policies in the Middle East based on illusions, which is my point about MEK and Maryam Rajavi. In the case of Iraq, there is this illusion that Baghdad is somehow our ally, when in fact it is perpetually an ally of Iran. This is painfully obvious from the developments today in Iraq. The same failed generals and civilian leaders who led us into this are not going to readily admit that. Trump himself must finally rectify these mistakes and make this coming decade an America First decade where we only fight and die for our own interests at our own border and for strategic assets elsewhere. It's time to fight to our own strengths rather than to the strengths of our enemies. Interesting article, well worth reading. Washington Post: Iran just outplayed the United States. Call the US Embassy in Baghdad merely a diplomatic mission is to severely understate its scope and size. At 104 acres, the compound is nearly the size of the Vatican City, comes complete with its own dormitories, dining halls, electrical plant, fire departments, and everything else needed to support the thousands of diplomats and contractors housed inside its thick walls. For the past 41 years, Iran has put on a master class in irregular warfare, leaving the United States flummoxed about how to respond. The Iranians took advantage of Bush's ill-advised decision to overthrow their nemesis Saddam Hussein to extend Iranian influence across Iraq under the very noses of American occupiers. Iran was already the dominant player in Lebanon. In the past 2 decades, it has become the dominant player in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen too. The new Persian Empire stretches from Tehran to Beirut. The embassy invasion on Tuesday was Iran's riposte to make clear it will not bow to American pressure. Your move, Mr. Trump. The United States has only 2 ways out of this escalating crisis: fight or negotiate. This is the point. Trump shows little interest in either seriously negotiating or fighting. He has waged economic warfare on Iran while doing nothing to curb its regional aggression. Indeed, by withdrawing US troops from part of northern Syria, he has allowed an extension of Iranian influence. So we're left with the worst of all possible worlds. Iran is once again waging a low-intensity conflict, and America once again has no effective response. And I said in a tweet, the truth of the matter is that Khamenei owns Trump's backside, in the sense that he can send 1 million men to that embassy in Baghdad. And Benghazi will be child's play. 25th of November, I was reiterating how Trump has been a big proponent of coercive financial, currency and sanction warfare, maximum pressure. And his policy of maximum pressure on Iran is that policy's apogee. Now, the final point is, of course, this takes us back to the price of oil, because that is the purest proxy for this renewed uncertainty. If you believe that this is going to calm down, then oil, or all the technical people I follow are saying that it's at the top of the range and it's going to break down from here. If you agree with that, if you think that this is a storm in a teacup, or Trump's going to negotiate now, then you probably need to sell oil. I personally think it isn't, and I think we're now into a new normal. Trump is in an election year. He's not going to want to be seen to be standing down. The Iranians have precisely a very finely calibrated asymmetric response. Take the attack on the oil refineries in Saudi Arabia, take what we saw over the weekend, take what I said about 1 million people marching on that embassy. What happens then? So I, for one, think oil is a buy, but we are in a situation which reminds me of that time in 1978 and 1979. And I think it would be wrong for any of us now to underestimate the situation. With that, I thank you for listening.